Welcome to my video of cycling the Loire. After flying to France to begin the journey, we had our first night at Maison Peak in Valognes. Sophie Pick, the owner, is the first female Michelin 3-star chef in Europe, so we were really excited to both eat there and also meet Sophie. The food was absolutely fantastic and way worth the trip to there. The following morning we boarded a bus which took us about 1,000 metres up into the mountains towards the source of Loire. The source of the Loire was actually another 1,000 metres above us, and we had to therefore cycle that bit of the route over a 30-kilometre stretch. So here am I looking refreshed and relaxed at the start of the ride. We saw some absolutely fantastic flowers and some beautiful views on the route up. I was quite pleased at the way in which I actually managed the cycle ride. I had thought I would have more problems. I have to admit, however, that I was even more pleased to actually get to the summit. The official start of the ride was on a lovely day. The objective of today was to arrive at Loire, and we had an absolutely fantastic ride the way all. Shortly after beginning the ride, we cycled over the first bridge on the Loire, and we then descended down further to this wonderful beach. Having done all that ascent on the day before, I really had hoped that we were downhill all the way, but as you can see from the previous picture, that was not to be the case, and we had a pretty steep uphill cycle for a short distance during the course of the day. The cycle ride included crossing over another number of bridges. This one was really high up. You could really then go into the valley below. It also involved cycling through tunnels that had been put into the route. I think these were actually old railway tunnels, but this was official tunnels that had been put into the route as part of the cycle track. Probably quite considerable expense, and I think it's an indication of how much French people love their cycling. And then we arrived in Le Puy to spend the night. The next 3 days were spent cycling in the rain. The rain was persistent, although not very heavy, and I quite enjoyed the cycle. I saw some lovely views and heard about the history of the Loire in the area that we were cycling. However, what was particularly galling for me was that at the time that I was cycling in the rain, Scotland was basking in glorious sunshine, and I was seeing pictures on Facebook of people climbing mountains, sitting on the top, sunbathing and having views to die for. Part of me felt like saying, get me on a plane home, I need to do some hill walking. Route Barry and inundation signs became a major feature of the rest of our trip, and they were signs that I came to dislike intensely, because that meant that the track was flooded and we had to find a way around it. Sometimes we managed to cycle through it, sometimes we managed to paddle through it pushing our bicycles. More often than not, we had to retrace our steps and cycle uphill to avoid flooding, which meant that the cycle route took us much hillier and much longer than we had anticipated. We still continued to enjoy the scenery in the cycle, but it was certainly much more challenging than I had anticipated. My most abiding memory today, as well as cycling in the rain and continuing to see the flooded Loire, was the fantastic aqueducts to cycle along, with the water, the Loire basically down below us. The other abiding memory was arriving at the zero sign for the Loire à vélo, which is basically the official Loire cycle route. This was our 8th day of cycling, and we'd only just really got to the start of the official cycle. Finally, the rain stopped, and we had a very pleasant day cycling on what was quite interesting tracks at times. This was a maze that had been built for the cycle track, which was quite incredible, and it merged into cycling along the canal bank. The flooding wasn't so bad today because we were basically cycling canals rather than the actual Loire itself. The canals did not seem to be flooded, it was the Loire that was flooded, and so therefore we encountered fewer problems today than we were to do later on in our journey. This way. This was the most spectacular aqueduct on the entire trip, and I had a lot of fun cycling along here with the water on my left and the Loire way down below. And at the end of the day, we arrived in Gien, where we visited the famous Gien Pottery Museum and Shop, where you can buy exclusive products for your dining table. Today we encountered a number of different forms of transport that might have actually helped us on our journey through the flooding in France. However, we decided no, we would continue cycling. Not a bad choice, since that was the plan for the holiday. However, that little bird there had a completely different point of view, and he sailed down the river on that log for quite some considerable distance. And then we met Joan of Arc and visited St Benoit Abbey. Before arriving in Orleans, where we stayed the night. Today the plan was to visit various chateaux. However, floods actually interfered with part of our plan. We did visit Chambord Chateau, which is the most grand chateau on the whole of the Loire, as you can see from the photographs, but visiting it and seeing around it was not possible due to flooding of the castle, which meant that no visitors were allowed inside. We therefore had to content ourselves with cycling around the chateau and taking pictures of it. Today we encountered some of the worst flooding as far as the people living in the Loire Valley were concerned. We were being held up due to flooding of our track, but some of the people that we passed, their houses were actually flooded and they were pumping those out. The children, however, as you can see, were having fun with the flooding, not so the adults who were having to cope with clearing out their houses and the destruction they did. The day ended by visiting Blois Castle, where we saw a sauna lumiere detailing the life of Joan of Arc, which was really fascinating. This video does not show what it was actually like in reality.
Vous ne devez pas seulement voir en elle la mère du roi, mais aussi la mère de l'État et du royaume.
I spent the morning looking around Blois Chateau and hearing about all the murder intrigue that happened in the chateau among the various kings and princes of the area in past years. It was quite interesting, and the chateau itself was absolutely superbly decorated, as you can see. The impact of the flood continued to be evident. Throughout our journey, we were stopped at times by the flooding, and we met a fish lying on the path miles away from the river, which had obviously been put up there with the floods. This was another day where our journey was significantly impacted by floods, but it was also a day where the highlight, or one of the highlights of the trip, was to go through this troglodyte village, which had people living in caves in the rocks, which was amazing. I didn't get good enough pictures of it to justify putting on video, but it was just absolutely amazing to see, and I wish I'd been able to film it to let you guys actually see what I experienced. The title, the flooding continued to dominate the next couple of days, although as you can also see from the pictures, the terrain that we were going through was absolutely fantastic. We visited Angers Castle, which was absolutely beautiful. As you can see, the grounds were stunning, and it was a fantastic experience just to wander around. Angers Castle is the ancestral home, or was the ancestral home, of the Plantagenets, who ruled England for about 250 years. The main reason, however, to go to Angers Castle is to see the Apocalypse tapestry, the biggest tapestry in the world. It was cut down into small pieces and used for various things like horse blankets, keeping oranges warm by the French Revolution. It's now been mostly brought back together again, and you can go and visit it. Deviations to avoid flooding meant that we cycled many kilometres more than we should have done had we been able to follow the route. And as I previously said, we had to cycle up much higher and much hillier terrain in order to avoid the flooding. This meant that we were constantly battling to be behind schedule, and by the time we ended day 15, we should have been in Nantes, and we were actually 25 kilometres out of Nantes, having cycled the whole of the distance we should have cycled to achieve Nantes. In Udon, I was in absolute despair as to whether we'd ever get to the sea without using public transport. However, Udon had an absolutely fantastic gourmet restaurant, and after a couple of glasses of wine and a lovely meal, my spirits were revived, and I became determined to find a way. Today I woke with the absolute conviction that I was determined to cycle to the source of the sea, to complete the Loire cycle route, source to sea, by cycle, not by any other means of transport. Initially, we had to cycle up over a hill, and this was to avoid the flooded part of the Loire that had stopped us on the previous day, and then we cycled through Loire and on down to here, which is the last road, the very last road leading to the Atlantic. I was just so overwhelmed and delighted to achieve this. And here we are coming up to the Loire Velo sign. This is the ending of the Loire Velo route, which actually was the route that started way up some distance ago, which we followed, but which doesn't actually start at the source of the sea, and it does not actually end at the Atlantic. It ends a few meters before it. Pleased as I was to reach the sign that says the end of the Loire, I was still determined I had to get to the sea, and so that involved just a few minutes cycle down through some sand, along a path, and then finally onto the approach to the sand. It was absolutely impossible to actually cycle to the sea because the sand was so deep, but I was absolutely over the moon when I was cycling down this walkway and then making my way out on the rocks as far as I possibly could to achieve the Atlantic. This walk along the rocks was probably a little bit crazy. It's really difficult to do when you're wearing cycle shoes which have got metal cleats in the bottom of them. You just slip and slide all over the place. And it was much easier to actually do what I eventually had to do, which was walk along the sand and just walk straight into the sea. And here I am, made it! Yay! Go us! Yes, we've made it. And then, of course, we ended up with a celebratory drink to say, well done, we've achieved our mission.